The shot cracked like thunder rolling through the mountains, the Barrett MRAD bucking against Sophia's shoulder as if it wanted to tear itself free. 3,000 meters of air and dust separated her from the target, a Taliban commander notorious for planting IED networks across the valley. His convoy had just halted near the bend of a dry riverbed, armored Hilux trucks parked in the shadow of a ridge. He was pointing at a map, shouting something to his men. A puff of red mist bloomed around his head before his body crumpled like a marionette with its strings cut. For a full second, silence owned the outpost. Then the men around the commander scrambled in panic, weapons lifted skyward as if they could shoot the bullet out of the air. "Holy shit," Private Moreno whispered, lowering his binoculars. 3 clicks confirmed kill. "That's, Jesus Christ, Sophia, that's impossible." Sophia didn't answer. Her breath fogged inside the thin scarf wrapped over her face. She pulled the bolt, chambered another round, eyes scanning the ridge. The job wasn't over until the entire convoy broke. The real test wasn't the first shot, it was the follow-through, the chaos that came after. The radio in her ear hissed. Captain Ramirez's voice broke through the static. "Alpha Sniper Team, confirm kill." "Confirmed?" Moreno said, still gawking at Sophia like she had just bent the laws of physics. "Target neutralized. The others are scattering." Ramirez swore softly on the other end, half disbelief, half admiration. "Outstanding. Sit tight. Delta Squad is moving to clean up." Sophia kept her cheek pressed to the rifle. Her heart wasn't racing. Her pulse was steady, too steady for what had just happened. The shot of a lifetime, and she felt empty. That was the thing no one told you about war. The silence after you did the impossible felt louder than the roar of gunfire. Moreno finally exhaled and laughed nervously. "Sniper Queen, huh? That's what they call you. Guess it fits." Never doubting that nickname again. "They called me that as a joke," Sophia said quietly, eyes still tracking movement through the scope. "Don't start acting like it means something now." But it did mean something, and everyone knew it. 2 weeks earlier, they had mocked her in the mess hall, laughing about the absurdity of a woman outshooting the men who had trained their whole lives with rifles. They called her Queen, the same way you might call the slowest guy in the platoon Speedy. That laughter died today. The convoy below scattered, trucks roaring to life, tires clawing at loose rock. One of the gunners in the back of a Hilux spun his PKM around, blind-firing bursts at the ridge. The rounds chewed dirt nowhere near their nest, but it was enough to remind Sophia that they were still in the fight. "Pack it," she ordered. Moreno shoved binoculars into his pack, slinging it over his shoulder. "Extraction point is 2 clicks east, right?" "Right." "Move." They crawled back from the lip of the ridge, keeping low. Dust and the smell of cordite clung to the air, following them like shadows. Sophia's legs were sore from hours in prone, but she moved with practiced efficiency, cradling the Barrett like an extension of herself. The rifle weighed nearly 15 pounds, but she carried it as if it were a child she'd sworn to protect. The sun was bleeding into the horizon by the time they reached the extraction zone, a shallow wadi where a Black Hawk would meet them. Sophia crouched in the shade of a boulder, scanning the ridgeline through her spotting scope. Moreno broke the silence first. "You ever think about how weird it is? One pull of the trigger and some guy's entire network falls apart. Like, you erased him from the map just like that." "That's the job," Sophia said. "Yeah, but, you don't feel anything? No rush?" "No." "Stop talking." He shut his mouth. She wasn't being cold, she was being honest. She didn't feel it the way the others did. When the bullet struck, she felt neither triumph nor guilt, only the weight of responsibility. Because every shot carried consequences beyond the kill. The convoy leader would be replaced. The Taliban would adapt. And the cycle would keep turning. The Black Hawk's rotors chopped the silence 20 minutes later, dust exploding into the wadi as it descended. Sophia and Moreno climbed aboard, greeted by the helmeted grin of Sergeant Ellis, the crew chief. "Heard you broke a record," Ellis shouted over the roar. Sophia strapped herself in. "Wasn't aiming for a record." "Yeah, well, you just made history. Whole FOB is buzzing. Bet they're gonna start calling you a legend." Sophia closed her eyes as the helicopter lifted. Legends didn't bleed, didn't carry scars, didn't wake at night hearing the echo of their own rifle. She wasn't a legend. She was a soldier with a rifle and orders, nothing more. When they landed back at FOB Mazar, the base was alive with rumors. Soldiers stopped her in the chow line, slapped her on the back, whispered "Sniper Queen" with a new tone, not mockery now but awe. Even Captain Ramirez gave her a rare smile as he passed. That night, sitting on her bunk, Sophia cleaned the Barrett piece by piece, the ritual soothing her thoughts. The rifle never judged, never mocked, never praised. It just did what she asked of it. She found comfort in that. Moreno, across from her, couldn't stop grinning. "Soph, you realize this changes everything, right? You're the new poster child. Next time Brass wants a feel-good story, your face is gonna be on it." "I don't care about posters." "Yeah, but they care. They'll want to use you." "I'm just saying, be ready." She didn't answer, because deep down she knew he was right. One shot had made her more valuable than she'd ever wanted to be. And in war, being valuable didn't always mean being safe. The next morning, Ramirez called her into the command tent. The air smelled of stale coffee and sandbags. Maps were spread across the table, red pins marking suspected Taliban strongholds. "You've drawn attention," Ramirez said, gesturing for her to sit. "Not just from us. Intel suggests insurgents know what happened yesterday. They're pissed. Word is, they've put a bounty on the sniper queen." Sophia's jaw tightened. "So now they'll hunt me. Not just you. Anyone near you. You've become a symbol, Corporal. They'll want to break that symbol." Sophia nodded. She wasn't afraid for herself, but the idea of her squad paying the price twisted her stomach. "We can rotate you out," Ramirez offered. "Send you back to Bugram for a while. Let things cool down." "No," she said firmly. "If they're hunting me, I'd rather face them here. With my rifle." Ramirez studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "I figured you'd say that." That afternoon, patrol orders changed. Sophia and Moreno were assigned overwatch for a convoy resupplying an allied Afghan village. It was standard procedure, except now, every mission carried an extra layer of risk. If the Taliban wanted her, they'd come for her on the field. The convoy rolled out at dawn, Humvees grinding over dirt roads lined with jagged rock. Sophia rode shotgun in the lead truck, the Barrett disassembled in its case at her feet. The driver, Sergeant Howard, glanced at her nervously. 00M shot with the Barrett MRAD. The shot cracked like thunder rolling through the mountains, the Barrett MRAD bucking against Sophia's shoulder as if it wanted to tear itself free. 3,000 meters of air and dust separated her from the target, a Taliban commander notorious for planting IED networks across the valley. His convoy had just halted near the bend of a dry riverbed, armored Hilux trucks parked in the shadow of a ridge. He was pointing at a map, shouting something to his men. A puff of red mist bloomed around his head before his body crumpled like a marionette with its strings cut. For a full second, silence owned the outpost. Then the men around the commander scrambled in panic, weapons lifted skyward as if they could shoot the bullet out of the air. "Holy shit," Private Moreno whispered, lowering his binoculars. 3 clicks, confirmed kill. "That's, Jesus Christ, Sophia, that's impossible." Sophia didn't answer. Her breath fogged inside the thin scarf wrapped over her face. She pulled the bolt, chambered another round, eyes scanning the ridge. The job wasn't over until the entire convoy broke. The real test wasn't the first shot, it was the follow-through, the chaos that came after. The radio in her ear hissed. Captain Ramirez's voice broke through the static. "Alpha Sniper Team, confirm kill." "Confirmed?" Moreno said, still gawking at Sophia like she had just bent the laws of physics. "Target neutralized. The others are scattering." Ramirez swore softly on the other end, half disbelief, half admiration. "Outstanding. Sit tight. Delta Squad is moving to clean up." Sophia kept her cheek pressed to the rifle. Her heart wasn't racing. Her pulse was steady, too steady for what had just happened. The shot of a lifetime, and she felt empty. That was the thing no one told you about war. The silence after you did the impossible felt louder than the roar of gunfire. Moreno finally exhaled and laughed nervously. "Sniper Queen, huh? That's what they call you. Guess it fits." Never doubting that nickname again. "They called me that as a joke," Sophia said quietly, eyes still tracking movement through the scope. "Don't start acting like it means something now." But it did mean something, and everyone knew it. 2 weeks earlier, they had mocked her in the mess hall, laughing about the absurdity of a woman outshooting the men who had trained their whole lives with rifles. They called her Queen, the same way you might call the slowest guy in the platoon Speedy. That laughter died today. The convoy below scattered, trucks roaring to life, tires clawing at loose rock. One of the gunners in the back of a Hilux spun his PKM around, blind-firing bursts at the ridge. The rounds chewed dirt nowhere near their nest, but it was enough to remind Sophia that they were still in the fight. "Pack it," she ordered. Moreno shoved binoculars into his pack, slinging it over his shoulder. "Extraction point is 2 clicks east, right?" "Right." "Move." They crawled back from the lip of the ridge, keeping low. Dust and the smell of cordite clung to the air, following them like shadows. Sophia's legs were sore from hours and prone, but she moved with practiced efficiency, cradling the Barrett like an extension of herself. The rifle weighed nearly 15 pounds, but she carried it as if it were a child she'd sworn to protect. The sun was bleeding into the horizon by the time they reached the extraction zone, a shallow wadi where a Black Hawk would meet them. Sophia crouched in the shade of a boulder, scanning the ridgeline through her spotting scope. Moreno broke the silence first. You ever think about how weird it is? One pull of the trigger and some guy's entire network falls apart. Like, you erased him from the map just like that. That's the job, Sophia said. Yeah, but, you don't feel anything? No rush? No. Stop talking. He shut his mouth. She wasn't being cold, she was being honest. She didn't feel it the way the others did. When the bullet struck, she felt neither triumph nor guilt, only the weight of responsibility. Because every shot carried consequences beyond the kill. The convoy leader would be replaced. The Taliban would adapt. And the cycle would keep turning. The Black Hawk's rotors chopped the silence 20 minutes later, dust exploding into the wadi as it descended. Sophia and Moreno climbed aboard, greeted by the helmeted grin of Sergeant Ellis, the crew chief. Heard you broke a record, Ellis shouted over the roar. Sophia strapped herself in. Wasn't aiming for a record. Yeah, well, you just made history. Whole FOB is buzzing. Bet they're gonna start calling you a legend. Sophia closed her eyes as the helicopter lifted. Legends didn't bleed, didn't carry scars, didn't wake at night hearing the echo of their own rifle. She wasn't a legend. She was a soldier with a rifle and orders, nothing more. When they landed back at FOB Mazar, the base was alive with rumors. Soldiers stopped her in the chow line, slapped her on the back, whispered "Sniper Queen" with a new tone, not mockery now but awe. Even Captain Ramirez gave her a rare smile as he passed. That night, sitting on her bunk, Sophia cleaned the Barrett piece by piece, the ritual soothing her thoughts. The rifle never judged, never mocked, never praised. It just did what she asked of it. She found comfort in that. Moreno, across from her, couldn't stop grinning. Soph, you realize this changes everything, right? You're the new poster child. Next time Brass wants a feel-good story, your face is gonna be on it. I don't care about posters. Yeah, but they care. They'll want to use you. I'm just saying, be ready. She didn't answer. Because deep down she knew he was right. One shot had made her more valuable than she'd ever wanted to be. And in war, being valuable didn't always mean being safe. The next morning, Ramirez called her into the command tent. The air smelled of stale coffee and sandbags. Maps were spread across the table, red pins marking suspected Taliban strongholds. You've drawn attention, Ramirez said, gesturing for her to sit. Not just from us. Intel suggests insurgents know what happened yesterday. They're pissed. Word is, they've put a bounty on the Sniper Queen. Sophia's jaw tightened. So now they'll hunt me. Not just you. Anyone near you. You've become a symbol, Corporal. They'll want to break that symbol. Sophia nodded. She wasn't afraid for herself, but the idea of her squad paying the price twisted her stomach. We can rotate you out, Ramirez offered. Send you back to Bugram for a while. Let things cool down. No, she said firmly. If they're hunting me, I'd rather face them here. With my rifle. Ramirez studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. I figured you'd say that. That afternoon, patrol orders changed. Sophia and Moreno were assigned overwatch for a convoy resupplying an allied Afghan village. It was standard procedure, except now, every mission carried an extra layer of risk. If the Taliban wanted her, they'd come for her on the field. The convoy rolled out at dawn, Humvees grinding over dirt roads lined with jagged rock. Sophia rode shotgun in the lead truck, the Barrett disassembled in its case at her feet. The driver, Sergeant Howard, glanced at her nervously. So you're the reason my wife back home texted me last night, asking if I knew the badass sniper lady, on CNN? They mocked Sophia the Sniper Queen. Then she landed a 3-0. Sophia didn't look up. Media should stay out of it. Howard chuckled. Good luck with that. People back home eat this stuff up. Makes them think we're winning. Are we? She asked. Howard didn't answer right away. We survive another day, I call that a win. The convoy reached the outskirts of the village by midday. Children ran beside the trucks, waving, their laughter carrying over the engines. It was moments like this, fleeting, fragile, that reminded Sophia why the fight mattered. For them, the war wasn't politics. It was survival. She and Moreno set up on a rooftop, scanning the surrounding hills while the resupply unfolded below. The Barrett rested on its bipod, scope glinting in the sun. "Looks clear," Moreno muttered, but there was unease in his voice. Sophia adjusted her scope. Too clear. The hills were quiet. Too quiet. And then she saw it, just the faintest shimmer like heat mirage except it was metal. "RPG East Ridge," she barked. Even before the words left her mouth, she squeezed the trigger. The Barrett thundered and the man holding the launcher toppled backward. But another popped up 2 ridges over, then another. The hills erupted. Gunfire cracked from multiple angles, dust plumes dancing around the convoy. Soldiers scrambled for cover, shouting into radios. Sophia's world narrowed to the scope. Her trigger finger became a metronome, each shot measured, each impact precise. One by one insurgents dropped. But they kept coming, shadows spilling from caves and gullies. "Jesus Christ," Moreno muttered, feeding her updates. "They're swarming us. It's like they knew we were coming. They hadn't just known. They'd been waiting." And in that moment, Sophia realized the truth. The bounty wasn't just a rumor. This ambush wasn't about the convoy. It was about her. And the war had just become personal. The crack of rifles and the thump of RPGs tore the valley apart, a sound like the earth itself was splitting. The convoy scattered into defensive positions, Humvees slewing sideways to form a hasty perimeter. Dirt kicked up around them as rounds pinged off armored plating. Sophia lay flat on the rooftop, the Barrett MRAD pressed against her shoulder, scope already hunting. The enemy wasn't hiding now. They poured out from gullies and rocky crevices, faces wrapped in scarves, AKs blazing. It was an ambush designed not just to destroy a convoy, but to make a statement. And she knew exactly who the statement was meant for. "Ridge 200 meters north, 3 shooters," Moreno shouted, his voice nearly drowned by gunfire. Sophia pivoted, adjusted her scope. The world compressed into her crosshairs. 3 men moving along the ridge, one kneeling with a PKM machine gun. She fired. The heavy round tore through the first man's chest, then slammed the gunner backward. The third froze just long enough for her to reacquire and put him down. The Barrett roared again, each shot echoing off the valley walls like a hammer hitting steel. Bodies toppled, dust clouds burst, but for every man she dropped, 2 more appeared. Down below, Sergeant Howard shouted over the radio, his voice jagged with urgency. "We're taking heavy fire. RPGs lighting us up. Where the hell is air support?" Ramirez's voice crackled back, calm but clipped. "ETA 10 minutes. Hold your ground." 10 minutes. That was a lifetime here. An RPG whooshed from the southern ridge, streaking toward the convoy. Sophia swung her rifle, exhaled, and squeezed. The rocket detonated midair in a blossom of fire, the insurgent launcher blown apart. The soldiers below cheered briefly before ducking as another burst ripped into a Humvee's hood, smoke belching skyward. "Jesus," Moreno muttered, loading a fresh magazine into her pack. "They're not letting up. This is about you. Has to be. Focus," she snapped. She couldn't afford the luxury of fear. She had to turn the battlefield into math. Distances, wind shifts, elevation. Every problem had a solution if she moved fast enough. Howard's Humvee took a direct hit, flames licking across its hood. He staggered out, coughing, dragging a wounded private by his vest straps. Sophia lined up on the shooter responsible and ended him in a blink. The private was hauled into cover, blood streaking the dirt. Her radio crackled again, this time Ramirez's voice urgent. "Sophia, you need to break their momentum. They're trying to pin us down until reinforcements cut us off. Find their spotters." She scanned high, searching for the telltale calm amid the chaos. Men not shooting but signaling, directing. There, on the far ridge, a figure with binoculars flashing in the sun, pointing, waving to fighters below. She centered the scope on him, squeezed. The man dropped, his signal silenced. Instantly, the fire slackened, confusion rippling through the enemy ranks. But it lasted only seconds. A new wave surged, shouting in Pashto, voices carried on the hot wind. They were relentless, and the numbers were against her. Moreno ducked as a round whizzed past, chipping stone beside his head. "They want you bad. They're not stopping until they have your head on a damn stick." Sophia didn't flinch. "Then they'll have to climb over a wall of bodies first." She fired again, the Barrett's recoil jarring her bones, the smell of hot metal and gunpowder burning her nostrils. Every shot carved open the battlefield, slowing the surge, buying seconds. But seconds weren't enough. Below, a Humvee gunner swiveled his .50 cal, letting loose with a brutal burst that chewed through rocks and fighters alike. Sophia shifted focus to cover his blind spots, tagging insurgents who tried to flank. The teamwork was unspoken but seamless. Another explosion rocked the ground. A truck had been hit, flipped on its side, smoke boiling. Screams cut through the chaos. "Medic," someone bellowed. Sophia's stomach twisted. Each scream was a reminder. No matter how perfect her aim, she couldn't stop everything. She could kill from 3 kilometers away, but she couldn't kill fate. "Air support inbound," Ramirez shouted over the net, his voice breaking up. "2 Apaches 3 minutes out. Hold the line." 3 minutes. Sophia gritted her teeth, scanned the ridge again. A squad of 6 fighters crept along the far side, moving to encircle the convoy. She pivoted, one after another, firing fast, the Barrett bucking against her shoulder. 5 went down before the 6th ducked behind rock. "Got one hiding," she said. "I see him," Moreno said, raising his M4. He fired short bursts, keeping the fighter pinned until Sophia found her angle. She squeezed and the man dropped. "Nice teamwork," Moreno muttered, trying to mask the fear in his voice. Another RPG streaked from the east. Sophia spotted it too late. The rocket slammed into the rooftop opposite theirs, showering them with debris. The building groaned, dust choking the air. "Time to move," she barked. They scrambled down the back stairs as the structure above them collapsed in a thunderous roar. Dust clouded the alley, gunfire echoing like thunderclaps. Sophia clutched the Barrett tight, every instinct screaming to keep it safe. They emerged into the chaos of the convoy perimeter, soldiers firing in every direction. A private with blood down his arm pointed desperately toward the ridge. "They're trying to push through." Sophia dropped prone, set up the Barrett, and began firing again, each round buying another soldier another breath. She was dimly aware of Moreno beside her, reloading magazines, shouting range calls, sweat streaking his dirt-smeared face. The roar of rotors thundered overhead. Relief surged through the chaos as 2 Apaches swooped in low, their cannons lighting up the ridges. Explosions ripped the enemy lines apart, fireballs blooming against the rocks. Insurgent fighters scattered like ants under boiling water. The battlefield tilted instantly. Soldiers who'd been pinned down moments earlier rose up, laying down suppressive fire, pushing the enemy back. The convoy perimeter held, smoke rising, bodies strewn across the valley floor. Sophia fired her last round, exhaled, then slumped slightly as the Apaches finished the work. The echoes of battle faded into the low rumble of helicopter engines and the groans of the wounded. For the first time in what felt like hours, the valley was still. Ramirez's voice came over the radio, tired but steady. "Convoy secure. Casualty reports incoming. Outstanding work, all of you." Sophia lowered the Barrett, staring across the battlefield. The ridges were littered with bodies. The smell of burned fuel and blood carried on the wind. She felt no triumph. Only the familiar emptiness. Moreno sat down heavily beside her, chest heaving. He gave a shaky laugh. "Sniper Queen. You just saved half the platoon. They'll be telling this story for years." Sophia wiped dust from her face, eyes narrowing at the horizon. "They won't stop here. That wasn't just an ambush. That was a test." "What do you mean?" "They're probing us. Testing how far they have to go to kill me." She packed the Barrett carefully, methodically, like she always did. "Next time it'll be bigger." Hours later, back at FOB Mazar, the mood was split. Some soldiers laughed too loudly, trying to shake off the fear. Others sat silent, staring into nothing, hands trembling. The medics worked without rest, patching, stitching, carrying stretchers. Sophia found herself summoned to the command tent again. Ramirez stood at the map table, a cigarette burning low in his hand. His face was harder now, carved with exhaustion. "They wanted you, Corporal," he said flatly. "Intel confirms it. That was a dedicated strike team, sent with one objective: kill the Sniper Queen." Sophia stayed silent. "You've become more than a soldier," Ramirez continued. "You're a symbol now. Our side sees you as proof of what we can do. Their side sees you as a threat to be erased. Either way, this war just shifted." "I'm not a symbol," she said quietly. "Tell that to CNN. Or to the Taliban commanders losing sleep because you can reach them from 3 kilometers out. You're in the middle of this, whether you like it or not." She looked at the map, at the red pins spreading across valleys and ridges like infection. A part of her wanted to walk away, to fade back into anonymity. But another part, deeper, harder, knew she couldn't. "Then I'll keep fighting," she said. "As long as I have a rifle, they won't break me." Ramirez gave a faint nod, almost like respect. "Get some rest. You'll need it. They'll come again. And when they do, I want you ready." Sophia walked out into the night. The base was quiet now, save for the low hum of generators and the occasional cough of a wounded soldier. She tilted her head back, staring at the stars, cold, distant, indifferent. Moreno appeared beside her, holding 2 bottles of water. He handed one over, managing a tired grin. We lived. Again. She took it, cracked the cap and drank. For now. You ever wonder, he asked softly, how many times we can roll the dice before it comes up snake eyes? She glanced at him, then back at the stars. Every time we walk out there, it's a gamble. But if I'm the reason they're pushing harder, then I'll be the wall they break against. Moreno shook his head, half admiring, half worried. You know that wall can crack, right? Then I'll make sure I take as many of them with me as I can. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Far out in the mountains, unseen in the darkness, another set of eyes watched through a scope of their own. The insurgents weren't done. They had failed today, but they had learned. And their hunt for the sniper queen was only beginning. And Sophia knew it. She could feel it in her bones. The war had shifted, and the next battle would be worse. She set the Barrett on the rack beside her bunk later that night, the cold steel gleaming under dim light. She whispered to it, not prayer, not hope, but a vow. Next time, she said, I'll be ready. The rifle didn't answer, but it didn't need to. The war was coming for her, and she would meet it head-on. The morning after the ambush, the base was thick with whispers. Sophia couldn't take 5 steps without someone nodding at her or muttering, "That's her," under their breath. The air was heavy with smoke from the burn pit, the usual morning stink of diesel and charred trash mixing with fresh tension. At the chow tent, Moreno slid his tray across the table from her. His eggs were untouched, his coffee half spilled, but he wore that crooked grin he always had when he was trying to mask nerves. So, rumor is they're putting your face on a mural at Bugram, he said, voice low. Sophia stabbed her fork into cold hash browns. Rumors are noise. You say that like you don't know the whole base looks at you different now. She did know. Eyes followed her in the hallways, in the yard, even in the latrines. The same soldiers who had mocked her weeks ago now treated her like a talisman. She hated it. Legends belonged in stories, not in boots and sand. Before she could answer, a corporal walked past their table and gave her a sharp nod. Sniper Queen. Good to have you on our side. Moreno smirked. See? Told you. Sophia pushed her tray away. Being a symbol doesn't stop bullets. Later that day, Ramirez gathered the platoon in the briefing tent. A fresh map of the valley was spread across the table, pins marking routes and suspected enemy positions. His tone was clipped, no wasted words. Yesterday's ambush confirmed what intel suggested. They're gunning for Corporal Sophia Hayes. They'll escalate. Which means every one of you is a target by association. His eyes swept the room. We can't hide. We can't play defense forever. We're taking the fight back to them. The plan was direct. A raid on a Taliban weapons cache hidden deep in the mountains, guarded by a network of fighters. The objective was twofold: cripple their supply line, and show them that ambushing American convoys came at a cost. As Ramirez laid out the details, Sophia felt every gaze drift toward her. She wasn't leading the mission, but everyone expected her rifle to change its outcome. The pressure pressed down like a physical weight. After the briefing, she lingered by the map table. Ramirez approached, lighting another cigarette. You don't have to prove anything, he said. I'm not trying to prove anything, she replied. Good. Because out there, proving something gets you killed. That night, she lay on her bunk, staring at the corrugated ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. She cleaned the Barrett again, the ritual steadying her hands. Moreno was already snoring across the room, boots still on. She thought of the faces of the men she'd dropped on the ridge. She tried not to, but they came anyway. War taught you to forget fast, but some images clung like burrs. At dawn, the platoon rolled out. Humvees kicked dust across the barren flats, mountains looming jagged in the distance. The silence inside the vehicles was thick, broken only by radio static and the occasional cough. Moreno leaned toward her, whispering so the others couldn't hear. You ever think what happens if you miss? Not just the shot, but the bigger picture? Like, if you slip, we all pay. Sophia adjusted the sling on her Barrett. That's why I don't slip. Hours later, the convoy halted a mile from the target compound. The platoon dismounted, boots crunching gravel, rifles at the ready. The mountains swallowed sound, every echo magnified. Ramirez split the unit. Delta Squad would circle from the west, Bravo from the east. Sophia and Moreno climbed a ridge overlooking the compound, the Barrett heavy in her hands. She set up prone, scope sweeping. The compound was a cluster of mud brick structures, Vehicles parked in the courtyard, fighters milling around with rifles slung casually. She counted at least 24. "They're relaxed," Moreno whispered. "They don't know we're here." "They will," she said, dialing in her scope. Ramirez's voice crackled in her earpiece. "On my mark." We hit fast and hard. Sophia centered on a man carrying an RPG near the main gate. Her breath slowed. Her finger curled. "Mark." The Barrett thundered. The man dropped, the gate erupting into chaos. Delta squad surged in from the west, rifles barking, grenades shattering windows. Fighters scrambled, some running, some firing wildly. Sophia worked the bolt, chambering, firing, chambering. Each shot was methodical, cutting down threats before they could pin her squad. Moreno fed her range calls, his voice calm despite the storm. Truck in the courtyard, gunner mounting the PKM. She swung, fired, the round slamming the gunner back against the cab. The PKM fell silent. Below, the fight was brutal. Insurgents poured from buildings, bullets hammering walls, grenades shaking the ground. American soldiers pushed forward, methodical, ruthless, clearing room after room. Sophia kept her focus high, scanning the ridges for flanking squads. And that's when she saw them, half a dozen fighters climbing fast, circling behind Delta's position. 6 o'clock ridge line, she barked. Ramirez responded instantly. "Copy. Suppress them." She fired, dropping one then another, but the rest ducked behind rocks. Grenade flashes lit the ridge, dirt spraying the sky. "Too many angles," Moreno muttered, sweat streaking his face. Sophia shifted position, crawling along the ridge to gain a better line. Bullets cracked overhead, chips of stone biting her cheek. She ignored the sting, sighted and squeezed. One down. Another popped up, muzzle flashing. She fired again. Silence. When she crawled back to position, Moreno was firing his M4 down into the compound, his jaw tight. "They're pushing back hard." Through her scope, she saw fighters dragging crates from one of the buildings. Not weapons, explosives. They were rigging the whole compound to blow. She keyed her radio. "They're setting charges. Whole place is wired." Ramirez cursed. "Copy. Everyone pull back. Get clear before they light it." Chaos erupted. Soldiers scrambled from buildings, dragging wounded. Gunfire intensified as insurgents covered their withdrawal. Sophia fired non-stop, her barrel hot, suppressing anyone who tried to chase. One of the fighters ran into the central building, a detonator clutched in his hand. "Not on my watch," she muttered. She lined him up, fired. The round punched through his chest, the detonator tumbling harmlessly to the floor. But another man scooped it up. Sophia adjusted, but before she could fire, the building erupted in a fireball. The shockwave slammed through the valley, tossing fighters and soldiers alike to the dirt. The blast rattled her teeth, knocked her scope off target. Smoke billowed, flames consuming the compound. Screams pierced the air. "Everyone accounted for?" Ramirez shouted, coughing. Voices answered, strained but alive. "Casualties but not annihilation." Sophia blinked through the smoke, ears ringing. Her shoulder throbbed where debris had clipped her. She ignored it, scanning the field. The compound was gone, but the cost was heavy. 2 soldiers lay still, their bodies shrouded by comrades. The sight twisted her stomach. Back at base hours later, the debrief was grim. The weapons cache was destroyed, but so was half the intel they had hoped to capture. The enemy had sacrificed the compound rather than let it fall. In the barracks that night, Moreno sat on his bunk, head in his hands. 2 good men gone. And for what? A pile of ash. Sophia sat across from him, cleaning the Barrett with steady hands. "If they had detonated sooner, we'd have lost the whole squad. You bought us time." He looked up, eyes tired. "You always sound so damn sure. Like none of this eats at you." She paused, hands still on the rifle. "It eats at me. I just don't let it show." He gave a bitter laugh. "Maybe that's why they call you Queen. Cool. Untouchable." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not untouchable. I just can't afford to break." The base buzzed with news the next day. Intel confirmed the bounty on her head had doubled. The Taliban had circulated her picture through the valley, promising a fortune to anyone who brought back the sniper queen, dead or alive. Sophia heard the whispers, felt the weight of eyes on her. Some soldiers looked at her with admiration. Others with unease. Being a symbol meant carrying not just pride but resentment. That night, she stood outside the barracks, staring at the dark mountains. Moreno joined her, silent at first. Then he said, "They're going to come again. Bigger, meaner. You know that, right?" "I know. And you're okay with that?" She took a long breath. No. But I don't get to choose the war. I only get to choose how I fight it. From the shadows of the valley, distant gunfire echoed faintly. The war wasn't over. Not for her. Not for any of them. And as the night wind carried the sound across the base, Sophia knew the next fight would come soon, and it would demand more from her than a perfect shot. It would demand everything. The blast rolled through the valley like the earth itself had been split open, a thunderclap that shook the rocks and sent dust spiraling into the twilight air. Sophia hit the ground hard, her chest compressing against the dirt as a secondary explosion popped somewhere deeper in the enemy's position. Her ears rang and the world blurred. For a long moment she thought the strike had caught her, that maybe this was how it ended, not in a glorious sniper duel or in the silence of a perfect kill, but in the chaos of someone else's trigger finger. When her vision steadied, she pushed herself up. Debris littered the slope below. Smoke belched upward, curling in long dirty plumes that caught the last rays of fading daylight. To her right, Ramirez coughed, his helmet tilted at an odd angle but still intact. "You good?" Sophia called, her voice hoarse. "Yeah," he rasped, spitting grit. "That was close." Close wasn't the word. The enemy mortar round had landed just 50 meters downslope. A few steps closer and the platoon would have been shredded. They hadn't even spotted the mortar crew. Whoever was calling fire on them was good, damn good. She scanned the distance with her scope, moving past the haze of dust and shrapnel. Her heartbeat slowed as the rifle steadied against her shoulder, the Barrett MRAD's weight grounding her. She pushed past the panic. Find the source. Survive. That was her rhythm. Then she saw it. A glint. Just a shimmer of glass half a mile out on the far ridge. A scope catching light for a split second before disappearing. Her chest tightened. Another sniper. "Ramirez," she said low, "we've got counter-sniper eyes on us. Half-mile east ridge." He groaned. "Figures. They want us pinned for the mortar crews." The squad leader shouted something over the comms, pulling the platoon tighter into cover, but Sophia tuned him out. She adjusted, following the angle where she'd caught the glint. Nothing now. Whoever it was, they knew their craft. No casual mistakes, no repeat flashes. This wasn't some insurgent with a stolen rifle. This was trained. The world shrank to her breathing and the pull of the trigger she hadn't pressed yet. She settled lower against the dirt, letting the MRAD's bipod dig in, the rifle's long barrel stretching out like a steel promise. "Talk to me," Ramirez muttered, crouching beside her. "He's waiting," she whispered. "Watching. Like you. Like me." The tension knotted in her chest wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was recognition. Somewhere out there, another sniper lay prone, scope aligned, heartbeat slowed, waiting for her to make the first mistake. Two predators in the same patch of wilderness. A radio squawk broke the silence, pulling her attention. The platoon leader's voice. "Sniper Queen status?" Sophia's mouth went dry. She hated the nickname, but the men had given it to her after that 3,000-meter shot weeks ago. They said it with a mix of awe and mockery, half respect, half teasing. She never corrected them because correcting meant you cared. But right now she wished she could shed it. The name felt like a spotlight, daring the enemy to test it. "Status green," she answered flatly. "Sniper contact. Ridge to the east. Likely controlling mortar fire." There was a pause. Then the LT replied, "Neutralize if possible." Of course. As if she hadn't thought of that already. She lowered back into her scope. The enemy was still out there. The ridge was wide, broken by boulders and scrub, shadows stretching long in the dim light. He could be anywhere. She shifted the zoom, scanning slowly. Patience was key. Move too fast and you miss the flicker of movement. Move too slow and he has you. Then, faintly, she caught it. A ripple, a brush against a bush that shouldn't have moved in the still air. She adjusted 1 mil left, held her breath. The outline of a helmet, half hidden, perfectly still except for the tiniest tilt of glass. "Got you." She exhaled and squeezed. The Barrett kicked like a mule, the recoil smashing into her shoulder. Dust puffed from the ridge where her shot landed, but no body dropped. Nothing. Empty rock. "Shit," she hissed. The return came instantly. A supersonic crack, a plume of dirt inches from her cheek. He'd baited her. Exposed false cover, then drew her shot. Her heart hammered. It was good. Ramirez swore softly, ducking lower. "We're in a duel now, huh?" "Yeah." Another mortar landed far off, forcing the platoon deeper into cover. Time wasn't on their side. The sniper was buying space for his support to triangulate them. Sophia ground her teeth. She couldn't let him control the fight. She slid left along the ridge, crawling on elbows and knees, dragging the MRAD carefully so the bipod legs didn't clink against stone. Each movement was deliberate. Quiet. She pictured him doing the same on his ridge, a mirror image. 15 feet over, she sat up again. Different angle, same calm breathing. She slowed her pulse, locked in. Waited. Minutes stretched. Silence, except for the faint rumbles of distant fire. The sun bled lower, shadows swallowing the terrain. If she didn't finish this before dark, he'd own the night. Then she saw him. Not glass this time. Not bait. A shoulder just barely out of line, shifting as he adjusted his rifle. She had him. Sophia's world narrowed to the crosshairs. The distance, the wind, the subtle shift of air funneled between ridges, all accounted for. She breathed out, slow and final. Squeezed. The shot cracked. Echoed. A half-beat later, the figure jerked, flung backward by the impact. The rifle tumbled down the slope. She kept her eyes on him, watching, waiting. No more movement. Target down, she whispered, almost reverent. Ramirez exhaled like he'd been holding it for hours. Holy hell, Queen. That was. Shut up, she said, but her lips twitched. For a moment, calm returned. The mortar fire ceased, the valley quieter except for the crackle of burning debris from the earlier strikes. The platoon began regrouping, voices rising over the comms with relief. But Sophia didn't relax. The way the sniper had baited her, the precision of his timing, it gnawed at her. That hadn't been some random enemy shooter. That was a professional. Someone trained, maybe even military. And if he was here, were there more? Her scope lingered on the ridge long after the body stopped moving. Something about the silence felt wrong. Too neat. Too finished. A voice crackled over comms. Queen, fall back with the squad. We're exfiltrating. She hesitated, eyes locked on the fallen enemy. Then finally broke her gaze, slinging the MRAD across her back. As she moved with the squad down the slope, Ramirez sidled closer. You thinking what I'm thinking? That he wasn't alone? Yeah. Sophia nodded once. The thought trailed her like a shadow all the way to their extraction point. By the time the helicopters churned the night air, lifting the platoon out of the valley, her mind wasn't on the battle they'd survived. It was on the one still waiting. Somewhere out there, another sniper was watching, learning. Someone who might already know her name. And if tonight proved anything, it was that the title Sniper Queen wasn't just a nickname anymore. It was a target. The thump of rotor blades faded into the night as the Black Hawks vanished over the dark horizon, leaving only dust swirling in their wake. Sophia sat in the belly of the bird, helmet off, face streaked with grime, her eyes locked on the black void outside. The men around her laughed in relief, voices loud and cracked with adrenaline. They'd survived another one. But she didn't laugh. Her mind replayed the shot over and over, the way the enemy sniper had exposed bait, how he'd nearly nailed her. He was skilled, too skilled to be alone. She knew snipers, trained them, studied them, lived in their world of patience and silence. No one like that operated without a partner or a spotter. Ramirez nudged her, breaking her trance. You're chewing on it, aren't you? On what? On the guy you dropped. You don't think he was working solo? Sophia said nothing, but her silence was enough. Ramirez's grin faded. He knew her too well. The LT moved down the cabin, gripping the overhead straps. All right, listen up. Intel's confirming what we suspected. The fighters aren't just ragtag cells anymore. Somebody's backing them. Training, weapons, coordination. It's beyond the usual. Tonight proved it. His gaze swept over the squad, stopping briefly on Sophia. You'll all get some rack time, but tomorrow we roll straight into planning. This is bigger than one valley fight. The words sank like stones in her gut. Bigger meant longer, bloodier. And if there were more like the sniper she'd faced, then her war had just gotten personal. When they touched down at the forward operating base, the soldiers spilled out into the floodlit night, dust rising under their boots. Sophia followed last, her Barrett MRAD slung across her back like a cross she couldn't put down. She felt the stares again, the same mix of admiration and wariness. The men called her the Sniper Queen, half in awe, half in jest, but after tonight it felt heavier. Titles had consequences. Hours later, after a debrief and a meal she barely tasted, Sophia lay on her cot in the dim barracks. Sleep didn't come. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of generators outside. She could still feel the enemy sniper in her scope, like his ghost was staring back through the glass. Finally, she rolled up and pulled her boots back on. The night air was cool when she stepped outside. Ramirez was already there, leaning against a barrier, cigarette glowing in the dark. Knew you wouldn't sleep, he muttered without looking. She smirked faintly. You're one to talk. They stood in silence for a while, the smoke curling between them. Then Ramirez asked, You ever think about what happens if you miss? I don't miss. That's not an answer. Sophia looked at him. His face was lined with dirt and exhaustion, but his eyes were searching. He wasn't mocking her. He wanted the truth. If I miss, she said quietly, somebody dies. Maybe you. Maybe me. That's why I don't. He nodded slowly, letting it sink in. Then he flicked the cigarette away and shoved his hands in his pockets. Well, let's hope you keep that streak alive, Queen. The next morning, the briefing room buzzed with tension. Maps were spread across the table, satellite images projected on the wall. The LT pointed with a pen. This ridge network here is where last night's sniper was operating. Intel confirms the mortar crews were coordinating through encrypted comms, gear they shouldn't have access to. Somebody's supplying them. Which means we're not just fighting insurgents anymore. We're fighting whoever's behind them. Sophia's jaw tightened. She scanned the images. Sure enough, there were trails, dugouts, firing positions. Professional work. The LT continued, HQ wants eyes on the network before we push. That means sending a recon element forward. Sophia Ramirez, you're going? No surprise there. Sophia had expected it. She glanced at Ramirez, who only raised his brows like, here we go again. The mission launched at dusk. Just the two of them, light gear, rifles and night vision. They moved through the hills like shadows, Sophia in the lead, every step measured. The MRAD rode across her chest, heavy but steady, her lifeline. The ridges loomed ahead, jagged against the star-streaked sky. She scanned constantly, every shadow a potential sniper, every bush a possible muzzle. The memory of last night's duel still burned in her nerves. Halfway up the slope, Ramirez hissed, Hold. They froze. Down below, faint voices drifted on the wind. Sophia slid prone, scope raised. Through the green haze of her NVG she saw them. 3 figures clustered near a radio set, whispering. Fighters, armed and alert. Not amateurs. She whispered, We're not here for them. Stay low. They slithered past, hearts pounding, until the voices faded. Then they climbed higher toward the ridge crest. When they finally reached the top, Sophia lay flat, scanning the opposite slope. And her stomach dropped. There were more. Not one sniper hide but several. Dug-in positions, camo netting, firing lanes marked with care. Whoever they'd killed last night wasn't just a lone wolf. He'd been part of a team. Jesus, Ramirez breathed. It's a damn sniper nest. Sophia's pulse raced. She counted at least 4 possible hides, maybe more. Some were empty, some looked occupied. This wasn't insurgency. This was doctrine. Military doctrine. Then she saw it. Movement. A figure sliding into position behind a long rifle, scope glinting faintly under the moonlight. Her breath caught. She knew that posture, that economy of movement. That wasn't a local fighter. That was someone trained like her. And he wasn't alone. She pulled back, whispering, We've got multiple snipers. Professional. This is bigger than Intel thought. Ramirez's face paled. What do we do? The smart move was to exfil, report back, let command handle it. But part of her, the stubborn, reckless part, wanted to stay to prove herself against them. To finish the duel that last night had started. Her radio crackled softly. HQ WhisperNet. Recon team status? Sophia hesitated, eyes still locked on the shadowed figures across the ridge. If she told them the truth, they'd pull her back. But if she stayed silent, the fight would come on someone else's terms. She swallowed, finally replying, Multiple sniper hides confirmed. At least 4. Professionals. Requesting guidance. Pause. Then the LT's voice. Understood. Hold position. Reinforcements inbound. Do not engage. Sophia clicked her radio off. Ramirez gave her a look. Do not engage, Queen. I heard him, she said flatly. But her finger brushed the trigger of her MRAD like it had a will of its own. Hours crawled by. They stayed hidden, watching through the night. The enemy snipers shifted occasionally, checking fields of fire, coordinating quietly. One even laughed at something, the sound drifting faintly through the stillness. They were human, but they were predators too. By dawn, her eyes ached from the scope, her muscles stiff from the cold. But she didn't move. She was in their world now, and they were in hers. Then, without warning, one of the enemy snipers turned his scope directly toward her position. She froze, breath locked in her chest. He lingered for a long, terrible moment, as if he could feel her staring back. Then he shifted away, adjusting his rifle. Ramirez whispered, "He saw us." "No," she said softly. "He sensed us." The words tasted like iron. This wasn't just war anymore. It was a hunt. And she wasn't sure who was the hunter and who was the prey. By the time reinforcements arrived hours later, Sophia's heart had already made its choice. She wasn't walking away from this fight. These weren't just enemies. They were her equals. Her rivals. And she'd meet them again, scope to scope, breath for breath. The others didn't know it yet, but for Sophia the war had just narrowed down to something smaller, sharper, and infinitely deadlier. A sniper's duel. A queen against her court. And in duels like that, only one crown survived. The convoy of Humvees rattled into the forward outpost before sunrise, their engines grumbling low, headlights doused to keep the approach quiet. Sophia crouched near the sandbags, MRAD laid across her lap, eyes sharp despite having barely slept. Reinforcements had finally arrived. The plan was simple on paper. Flush the sniper nest from the ridges, destroy their comms hub, and secure the high ground before the enemy had a chance to regroup. But Sophia knew better. Nothing about going toe-to-toe with a professional sniper team was simple.